A person who does business by rule, having a time and place for everything, doing his work promptly, will accomplish twice as much and with half the trouble of him who does it carelessly and slipshod. By introducing system into all your transactions, doing one thing at a time, always meeting appointments with punctuality, you find leisure for pastime and recreation. Whereas the man who only half does one thing and then turns to something else and half does that, will have his business at loose ends and will never know when his day's work is done, for it never will be done. Of course, there is a limit to all these rules. We must try to preserve the happy medium, for there is such a thing as being too systematic. There are men and women, for instance, who put away things so carefully that they can never find them again. It is too much like the red tape formality at Washington and Mr. Dickens' circumlocution office, all theory and no result. When the Astor House was first started in New York City, it was undoubtedly the best hotel in the country. The proprietors had learned a good deal in Europe regarding hotels, and the landlords were proud of the rigid system which pervaded every department of their great establishment. When 12 o'clock at night had arrived and there were a number of guests around, one of the proprietors would say, "Touch that bell, John," and in 2 minutes 60 servants with a water bucket in each hand would present themselves in the hall. "This," said the landlord, addressing his guests, "is our fire bell. It will show you we are quite safe here. We do everything systematically." This was before the Croton water was introduced into the city. But they sometimes carried their system too far. On one occasion, when the hotel was thronged with guests, one of the waiters was suddenly indisposed, and although there were 50 waiters in the hotel, the landlord thought he must have his full complement or his system would be interfered with. Just before dinner time he rushed downstairs and said, "There must be another waiter. I am one waiter short. What can I do?" He happened to see Boots, the Irishman. "Pat," said he, "wash your hands and face. Take that white apron and come into the dining room in 5 minutes." Presently Pat appeared as required, and the proprietor said, "Now, Pat, you must stand behind these 2 chairs and wait on the gentleman who will occupy them. Did you ever act as a waiter?" "I know all about it, sure, but I never did it." Like the Irish pilot, on one occasion when the captain, thinking he was considerably out of his course, asked, "Are you certain you understand what you are doing?" Pat replied, "Sure, and I knows every rock in the channel." That moment, bang thumped the vessel against a rock. "Bejabers, and that is one of 'em," continued the pilot. But to return to the dining room. "Pat," said the landlord, "here we do everything systematically. You must first give the gentlemen each a plate of soup, and when they finish that, ask them what they will have next." Pat replied, "And I understand perfectly the virtues of system." Very soon in came the guests. The plates of soup were placed before them. One of Pat's 2 gentlemen ate his soup. The other did not care for it. He said, "Waiter, take this plate away and bring me some fish." Pat looked at the untasted plate of soup, and remembering the injunctions of the landlord in regard to system, replied, "Not till ye have ate your soup." Of course that was carrying system entirely too far. Read the newspapers. Always take a trustworthy newspaper, and thus keep thoroughly posted in regard to the transactions of the world. He who is without a newspaper is cut off from his species. In these days of telegraphs and steam, many important inventions and improvements in every branch of trade are being made, and he who don't consult the newspapers will soon find himself and his business left out in the cold. Beware of outside operations. we sometimes see men who have obtained fortunes suddenly become poor. In many cases, this arises from intemperance and often from gaming and other bad habits. Frequently it occurs because a man has been engaged in outside operations of some sort. When he gets rich in his legitimate business, he is told of a grand speculation where he can make a score of thousands. He is constantly flattered by his friends, who tell him that he is born lucky, that everything he touches turns into gold. Now, if he forgets that his economical habits, his rectitude of conduct, and a personal attention to a business which he understood caused his success in life, he will listen to the siren voices. He says, "I will put in $20,000. I have been lucky, and my good luck will soon bring me back $60,000. A few days elapse, and it is discovered he must put in $10,000 more. Soon after, he is told it is all right, but certain matters not foreseen require an advance of $20,000 more, which will bring him a rich harvest. But before the time comes around to realize, the bubble bursts. He loses all he is possessed of, and then he learns what he ought to have known at the first, that however successful a man may be in his own business, if he turns from that and engages in a business which he don't understand, he is like Samson when shorn of his locks. His strength has departed, and he becomes like other men. If a man has plenty of money, he ought to invest something in everything that appears to promise success and that will probably benefit mankind. But let the sums thus invested be moderate in amount, and never let a man foolishly jeopardize a fortune that he has earned in a legitimate way by investing it in things in which he has had no experience. Don't endorse without security. I hold that no man ought ever to endorse a note or become security for any man, be it his father or brother, to a greater extent than he can afford to lose and care nothing about, without taking good security. Here is a man that is worth $20,000. He is doing a thriving manufacturing or mercantile trade. You are retired and living on your money. He comes to you and says, "You are aware that I am worth $20,000 and don't owe a dollar.